1. Introduction. ROSEP. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. ROSEP. Purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning. Wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXXW September 30th, 2025 3D printing instructions download of Trump-Epstein statue is free. In Webisode 57DHXXW 1 3D printing instructions download of Trump-Epstein statue is free. https://front/ www.printables.com/model/142 6349-Trump-Epstein-best-friends-forever-statue-miniature Trump and Epstein-best friends forever statue miniature the secret handshake at secrethandsh_369 for $299 Trump-Epstein best friends forever statue. You can celebrate Friendship Month at home and remember this historic monument to electric vehicles. See how EV road trips went from impossible to easy. 3 movie opinion, an anti-fascist movie at a fascist moment. 4 Pope Leo plans to speak on climate change. 5 United Kingdom Keir Starmer Labour Prime Minister Starmer describes fight for the soul of UK as populist right rises. 6 Our world is hurtling into climate disaster, and what do politicians give us? Oil fields and new runways. 7 Government shutdown unions are handing Democrats a golden opportunity amid the shutdown battle. 8 United Kingdom Keir Starmer Labour Prime Minister. Was this the Starmer best speech? Yes, but he will need a new battle plan to convince a doubting Britain. Main content. 2 Electric vehicles. See how EV road trips went from impossible to easy. See how EV road trips went from impossible to easy. A rider has taken a 400-mile road trip in an electric car. Another rider makes great road trip playlist. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, September 29, 2025. Long drives that were once effectively impossible with an electric car have become doable. Routes that once required careful planning now have abundant fast chargers for EV owners. One quintessential American experience hitting the open road is no longer just a dream. We picked major cities from each state and mapped out trips between them. We looked at drives you can do in a day, any longer than that. And you can use a slow charger overnight. You can find a route and see how it has changed on the map below, or just pan around to see the whole country. Currently showing all charging stations based on stations within a 10-mile drive of the route that were logged as open by the Department of Energy on September 3rd of each year. Private chargers, such as those for hotel customers, are excluded. Fast chargers are often built at gas stations outside restaurants and by shopping outlets. Most electric car owners do not need to use them frequently. The overwhelming majority of car trips are below 50 miles, and a new EV can usually easily drive well over 50 miles, even in poor conditions, so charging usually happens at home. But just as the rest stop gas station has become an integral part of American highways, fast chargers are critical for driving beyond a single charge. Whether to visit family, work, or sightsee, they are also important for people who cannot charge at home or who drive an Uber and a Lyft, and they are a key to soothing range anxiety or fear of people of not making it to the next charger, which for years has been the single most important concern among potential EV buyers. Their concerns have not been unfounded. Through the 2010s, it was hard for EV drivers to leave certain urban pockets, but for most major destinations now, thanks to both longer vehicle ranges and the proliferation of chargers, EV drivers can just get up and go. Some of that growth is recent. In just the last few years, since 2020, fast chargers have popped up across the South, Midwest, Great Plains, and more rural parts of the Northeast. Playing catch up with more populated areas. The picture is not perfect on the go. Fast charging still takes more time and can cost more than going to the gas pump. Home charging is typically cheaper than gas. On average, 3% of fast chargers are out of commission at any time, and those that do work can be challenging and confusing to use depending on your car, but things are getting better. New chargers can refill an EV faster on average than those built just a few years ago, and new stations have more chargers than they used to. In 2015, the average fast charging station had 2 ports. Now it has 5. A group of major car manufacturers has started the Iona network, which has committed to building 30,000 charging ports across the country. Ford and Rivian have each already built more than 100 fast charging stations. Volkswagen funded the Electrify American network with $2 billion that it was required to set aside after cheating on diesel emission tests. The network now has around 1,000 fast charging stations. There are also major EV infrastructure companies building out their networks. In total, 6 big networks: Tesla, ChargePoint, EV Go, Electrify America, EV Connect, and Blink have built more than 2/3 of the U.S. fast charging stations. A number of smaller operators own the rest, including power companies like Hawaiian Electric, Florida Power and Light, and Mid-American in Iowa, which have all become major fast charger operators in their states. And retailers and gas stations have joined the rush. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory estimates the country will need some 180,000 fast charging ports by 2030. If the expansion continues at the pace of today in the U.S., will hit that number in the early 2030s. If the rate continues to accelerate as it has in recent years, that day could come much sooner. About the data, locations of chargers come from the historical data sets of the Alternative Fuels Data Center. For September 3rd of each year, we included only stations recorded as open to the public and functional on that date, with at least 1 DC fast charging port. Over the last decade, the AFDC transitioned from manually counting stations to automatic data collection. We used the Mapbox Driving Directions API for routes and included only drives that were at least 150 miles and fewer than 10 hours long. We excluded routes that went primarily through Canada. For each station in AFDC data, we used the Mapbox isochrone API to find driving distance from the station at 3, 10, and 50 miles. We only counted a charger as along a route if it was within 10 driving miles. 3 Movie opinion, an anti-fascist movie at a fascist moment. 1 Battle After Another starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, September 29, 2025. Photo of Leonardo DiCaprio in a black hooded jacket, a light shining behind him. The Paul Thomas Anderson magnificent new movie 1 Battle After Another arrived in theaters last last week, but it was made in the America that existed before Donald Trump returned. Watching it, I kept wondering if such a forthrightly anti-fascist film could be produced in Hollywood today, a political thriller shot through with absurdist humor. The movie has several scenes that might have seemed imaginatively dystopian when they were shot, but now look like news outtakes. Its villain is an against immigrant fanatic who at one point lays siege to a sanctuary city under the dishonest pretext of fighting cartels. The movie posits a white nationalist cabal at the highest levels of the American establishment called amusingly the Christmas adventurers, whose rhetoric is not all that different than the Trump. Yet if one battle after another does not celebrate revolutionary violence, it also does not condemn the broad goals the French 75 fought for. Indeed, it celebrates those who quietly keep radical hopes alive. Its most winning character is the character played by Benicio del Toro, named Sergio St. Carlos, a karate sensei, who runs an underground railroad for undocumented immigrants and who moves through the chaos of the film with Buddha-like serenity. There is something subversive in the best possible way in the vision of the film of good and evil. The same week it came out, the administration released a national security memorandum denouncing movements that portray foundational American principles as fascist to justify and encourage acts of violence. Revolution. Watching one battle after another feels liberating, in part because it is heedless of all the new taboos Trump and his henchmen are trying to force on us. The movie could scarcely be more relevant in the Trump America, but it carries with it the assumptions of a better country. For Pope Leo plans to speak on climate change near a garden where popes go to pray. Leo plans to speak on climate. The address comes 10 years after the groundbreaking statement of his predecessor Pope Francis on global warming. His words will be watched for signals on the direction of the new papacy. Rosep view looking forward to statements from Pope Leo XIV in support of the environment and possibly in support of fighting air pollution. Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, September 30th, 2025. On Wednesday, Pope Leo XIV will be at Castel Gandolfo to give his first address on climate change. He has already spoken briefly, if forcefully, on the subject. Grave inequalities and the greed that fuels them are spawning deforestation, pollution, and the loss of biodiversity. Leo said a few weeks ago extreme natural phenomena caused by climate changes provoked by human activity are growing in intensity and frequency, but his remarks at a climate conference on Wednesday are expected to be his fullest yet on the subject. They will be closely watched as they are intended to mark the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, a groundbreaking papal document written by his predecessor Francis that essentially updated the teachings of the Catholic Church to specifically address climate change. Following Laudato Si, concrete steps were taken by bishops of Ireland, who pledged to divest their churches from fossil fuel interests and to convert 30% of all parish-owned land back to wilderness. That has really caught the imagination of people. The rank and file of cardinals and bishops of the Catholic Church, particularly those in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, where the church is growing the fastest, have been as explicit as Francis and Leo on their desire for action on climate change. In July, regional conferences of bishops from those three continents issued a joint document titled A Call for Climate Justice and the Common Home, Ecological Conversion, Transformation, and Resistance to False Solutions. The Archbishop of Goa and Daman in India wrote that the message of the statement was a call to conscience in the face of a system that threatens to devour creation as if the planet were just another commodity. 5. United Kingdom. Keir Starmer. Labour Prime Minister Starmer describes fight for the soul of UK as populist right rises. Starmer describes fight for the soul of UK as populist right rises. In a speech at an annual Labour conference, the British Prime Minister contrasted his political project with that of Nigel Farage, whose Reform Party promises mass deportations. Photo of Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain, his wife Victoria Starmer at the Labour Party annual conference in Liverpool, England on Tuesday. Rosep view, like Kamala Harris, needed to explain the negative economic effects and destruction of government and destruction of research programs for science and medicine that Trump would bring during her campaign for president in 2024. Keir Starmer needs to explain the negative economic effects and destruction of beneficial government programs that the far-right Nigel Farage Reform Party in the United Kingdom would bring. Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, September 30th, 2025. Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain denounced what he called the politics of grievance on Tuesday, seeking to revive his plummeting approval numbers with a warning about embracing intolerance that was directly aimed at Reform UK, the against immigration party that has surged in popularity across the country with Scottish Welsh and a fresh set of municipal elections just 8 months away. Starmer said in his annual speech to Labour Party loyalists that the choice facing British voters between Labour and Reform is a fork in the road that will determine the fate of the democracy of the country. We can choose decency, or we can choose division, renewal, or decline. He said it is a test, a fight for the soul of our country, every bit as big as rebuilding Britain after the war. The Starmer words underscore the political threat to his party from Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform, whose approach to immigration and economics echoes President Trump, having once described mass deportations as a political impossibility in Britain. Farage recently changed course, presenting a plan to deport hundreds of thousands of people, including some who had previously been granted a long-term right to remain in Britain. Starmer does not have to call a general election until 2029, but multiple polls suggest that Reform, an insurgent party with only 5 members of parliament, would trounce Labour if an election were held today. In his speech, Starmer cast the choice as a test for voters. It is one that some of his own allies fear he might not pass. We are the disinfectant that is going to clean up the pollution of the far right in our politics, said the housing secretary, who added that Labour must show the people of this country that we are on their side, that we are making the difference that will transform their lives, fighting to be heard amid the hubbub. The woman education secretary told the party members that divided parties do not win elections, and we will not beat Reform if we are arguing among ourselves. She also appealed to them to be more vocal in campaigning. We have got to be out there telling the positive story of what this Labour government is delivering, she said. If we do not make make that case. Nobody else will. 6. Our world is hurtling into climate disaster. And what do politicians give us? Oil fields and new runways. Our world is hurtling into climate disaster. And what do politicians give us? Oil fields and new runways in the name of pragmatism. Green measures are being ditched. Net zero derided. Be very clear. Without slashing emissions, we are in deep trouble. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. The hope that followed the signing of the Paris Climate Agreement in 2016 has long gone, as the global community has failed utterly to rein in emissions, which, barring a small pandemic-induced blip in 2020, have headed remorselessly upwards ever since. And there is little sign of this changing anytime soon. Indeed, as global heating has accelerated over the past few years, instead of trying harder, the world is turning its back on measures to tackle the climate crisis. In the UK, Labour is considering the approval of 2 major new oil fields in the North Sea, Rosebank and Jackdaw, with both Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves reported to be backing the proposals, which would lock in reliance on fossil fuels at the expense of renewables. A recent report by the UK Institute and Faculty of Actuaries and Exeter University forecasts that a 2-degree centigrade global temperature hike by 2050 would see a 25% collapse in the global economy and 2 billion people dead. This is what the end game of a pragmatic climate strategy looks like. We can no longer pretend that we are sleepwalking into climate catastrophe. We are doing it consciously with our eyes wide open and hang the consequences. The truth is that on a rapidly heating planet, a pragmatic approach means that we are playing Russian roulette. 7. Government shutdown. Unions are handing Democrats a golden opportunity amid the shutdown battle. The move of federal workers offers Democrats a chance to win the budget battle and their identity. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. The Federal Unionist Network Fund and 35 national, state, and local unions have written a letter to the Democratic congressional leadership, Chuck Schumer in the Senate and Hakeem Jeffries in the House, urging them to hold out against Republicans in the budget negotiations, even if it means a government shutdown and halted paychecks. The signatories represent tens of thousands of federal workers, according to an Fund press release. The demands of Democrats, the letter says, should include adequate funding for critical public services and a guarantee that funds appropriated by the Congress are spent. This gives the Democrats the chance not just to win this budget battle, but to begin to win back their identity and the people who should be their base. A government shutdown is never plan A. The letter reads, federal workers and the communities we serve will face severe hardship, but federal workers will willingly forego paychecks in the hopes of preserving the programs we have devoted our lives to administering. Organized labor is giving the party that abandoned it another chance to show which side it is on. They are standing with Democratic allies in Congress. Those Congress members must stand with them. As usual, the leadership of the party is focusing on one thing this time. It is cuts to Obamacare subsidies. That is a good start, but in this letter the unions have told most of the narrative. The Democrats need only to furnish the moral of the story. Why are the Republicans cutting everything under the sun, endangering the safety, security, and prosperity of the country to further enrich their rich friends and corporate benefactors? Now is your chance, Democrats. Do not blow it. Asterisk. 8. United Kingdom. Keir Starmer, Labour Prime Minister. Was this the Starmer best speech? Yes, but he will need a new battle plan to convince a doubting Britain. The era when a barnstorming address would turn political fortunes is gone. The PM is out of step with modern digital politics and needs to catch up. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. Keir Starmer saved his best for the fragile circumstances of a difficult labor conference. It may not yet be enough to save him. All the same, this was by some way the Starmer most effective and certainly his most interesting conference speech since becoming Labor leader 5 years ago. To win an argument like the one that faces Labor today, he needs to prepare much better, hone the argument more fully, turn it into a campaign, make it patriotic and practical, and use exciting words. Make the promises substantive, but do not promise instant rewards. You absolutely should not just say something for a one-day headline and then ignore it, as Starmer seems to have done on digital ID in his speech. That approach is guaranteed to lose control. It may be true that the battle against Farage gives Labor an enemy to fight against and a cause to believe in, and that this will unite and energize the grassroots in the circumstances facing Starmer in Liverpool. That may seem like enough of an achievement, but like conference speeches in general, it is unlikely to reach out for long to the uninvolved and indifferent. To these voters, Starmer is not a reason to vote Labor rather than Reform or Tory, as the Labor devotees will tend to see it. For too many, the Keir Starmer inability to solve the economic and social decline of this country may look like continuity hopelessness. Headlines. The New York Times, September 30th, 2025. Art. No woman could have painted this. They said they were wrong. The New York Times. Artificial intelligence. Do you use AI chatbots for health advice? The New York Times. Artificial intelligence. Top AI researchers leave OpenAI, Google, and Meta for new startup. The New York Times. Broadway show stars cheer on Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter at Waiting for Godot opening night. The New York Times. Consumers bicycles welcome to the jumble inside the bike flea market of Brooklyn. The New York Times. Consumers coffee shop politicized by Trump. Kirk actions. Opinion. How did my fellow baristas end up on them? Front lines of a culture war. The New York Times. Consumer skincare. What is a good skincare routine for me and the planet too? The New York Times. Consumers 3D pins. The 2 best 3D pins of 2025 reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers travel. What travelers need to know about delaying vacation payments with BNPL. The New York Times. 2 electric vehicles. See how EV road trips went from impossible to easy. The New York Times. Government shutdown. A history of government shutdowns traces decades of funding struggles. The New York Times. Government shutdown. A liberal group returns to push Democrats to oppose Trump. The New York Times. Government shutdown. Deadlock grows uglier as Congress heads toward government shutdown. The New York Times. Government shutdown. Opinion. Newt Gingrich. How to win a shutdown fight. The New York Times. 3 movie opinion. An anti-fascist movie at a fascist moment. The New York Times. Music Taylor Swift's 6 key pop moments on her path to the life of a showgirl. The New York Times. New York City cost of mass transport NYC subway and bus fares will rise to $3 in January. The New York Times. New York City mayoral race. How Zoran Mamdani built a campaign around food. The New York Times. New York City organizations in 5 boroughs get a boost with city funds. The New York Times. 4 Pope Leo plans to speak on climate change. The New York Times. Republicans' opinion. The right did not catch cancel culture from the left. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts to fund tax breaks for the rich in some states. Strapped counties must impose the Trump Medicaid cuts. The New York Times. Trump drug prices. Trump announces Pfizer deal to lower some drug prices and unveils Trump prescription RX website. The New York Times. Trump lawsuits fight over hidden report on Trump documents. Case goes to appeals court. The New York Times. Trump lawsuits. An unusual move. Prosecutors secure federal charges from local grand jury. The New York Times. Trump Medicaid cuts. The Trump bill followed the Georgia lead on Medicaid. The New York Times. Trump military live updates. Trump addresses rare military gathering as government shutdown looms. The New York Times. Trump military opinion. Can the Trump peace plan overcome unprecedented cruelty? The New York Times. Trump military opinion. Distressing uses of the power of the president. The New York Times. Trump Supreme Court opinion. Hypercharged is the only word for this Supreme Court. The New York Times. Trump military opinion. The Pentagon should retract its secrecy pledge. The New York Times. Trump military. Trump and Hegseth recount familiar partisan complaints to top military leaders. The New York Times. Trump unpopularity. Trump is still unpopular in our poll. Why are not Democrats doing better? The New York Times. Trump military. Trump pardon ended probe into Green Beret killing a suspected Taliban bombmaker. Was justice served? The New York Times. Trump visa policy. The Trump $100,000 visa upends lies. My dreams were shattered. The New York Times. 5 United Kingdom. Keir Starmer. Labour Prime Minister Starmer describes fight for the soul of UK as populist right rises. The New York Times. Ukraine. The Russian military budget shrinks as war costs hit the Kremlin economic limits. The New York Times. Ukraine's secretive program that keeps the weapons of Ukraine firing is suddenly in doubt. The New York Times. South African ambassador to France is found dead in Paris. The New York Times. China. How Chinese weapons transformed a war between two neighbors. The New York Times. Headlines. The Guardian. September 30th, 2025. Air pollution from indoor residential wood burning contributes to climate change on a hyper-local level, and air pollution from industrial wood burning contributes to climate change on a macro level. Both methods of wood burning contribute to adverse health outcomes of near neighbors to homes and residential areas, and to residential and business areas near industrial wood burners. 6 Our world is hurtling into climate disaster, and what do politicians give us? Oil fields and new runways. Bill McGuire. The Guardian. Government shutdown. Trump says government shutdown likely as House Democrats call out Republicans for delaying votes before funding deadline. Live 7 Government shutdown. Unions are handing Democrats a golden opportunity amid the shutdown battle. Judith Levine. The Guardian. Government shutdown. U.S. government heads toward first shutdown in 6 years as lawmakers fail to reach agreement. U.S. politics. The Guardian. Tech brothers culture. Sperm racing is all the rage among the tech bros. Why am I not surprised? Arwa Madawi. The Guardian. Trump relatives deal of the Trump son-in-law. It is the art of the dodgy deal. Middle East edition. Author Donald Trump updated by Jared Kushner. Marina. Hide. The Guardian. Venezuela. As U.S. warships prowl the Caribbean. Our region must hold fast against the Trump gaslighting. Kenneth Mohammed. The Guardian. United Kingdom lawsuits. The Clive Palmer multi-billion-dollar claims make a mockery of a tribunal that allows foreign investors to challenge court decisions. Patricia Reynold. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Keir Starmer. Labour Prime Minister. I have seen despair at the Labour conference, but the Starmer battle for the soul of Britain is one he can still win. Polly Toynbee. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Keir Starmer. Labour Prime Minister. Labour just does not get it. Workers feel poorer than ever. Is it any wonder reform is rising? Sharon Graham. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Keir Starmer. Labour Prime Minister. My conference pass was revoked for asking difficult questions. This is the Labour Party of Keir Starmer. Owen Jones. The Guardian. 8 United Kingdom. Keir Starmer. Labour Prime Minister. Was this the Starmer best speech? Yes, but he will need a new battle plan to convince a doubting Britain. Martin Kettle. The Guardian. Germany. The against diversity backlash is not fatigue. It is strategy masquerading as neutrality. Fatma Ademir. The Guardian. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American. Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosette view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions. Yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is Not absorbed by trees, so PM2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut down and burn tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosette View Purple Air PM2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.